Welcome to John Martin Talks, where we battle ignorance and apathy daily. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Trump continues to win. He's having a great trip so far over in jolly old England. He had a state dinner last night. We're not going to talk too much about that, but President Trump is definitely the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, and he is showing it all in all his glory on the international scene right now. But Trump is winning at home as well, and that's what we're going to talk about right now. This comes to you from the New York Times. Trump wins ruling in House border wall suit. President Trump ended a losing streak in court clashes with the House on Monday, talking about the House of Representatives, Nancy Pelosi's house at the moment, I suppose, on Monday, as a federal judge rejected the Democratic-controlled chamber's lawsuit seeking to stop him from using emergency powers to build a wall along the southwestern border. So Trump is winning, as I say, while others are whining, and whining. Judge Trevor N. McFadden of the United States District Court for the District of Columbia, who was appointed by Mr. Trump, so see, these judgeships really matter, ruled that the House could not show that it had suffered the sort of injury that gave it standing to sue. Well, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, and I've talked about this before, but Congress, I'm not talking about this particular Congress nor this particular president, I believe it was in 1976, memory serves me correct, but Congress gave the presidency, not just Donald Trump, but the office of presidency, the Emergency Powers Act, in order to do exactly what Donald Trump did. So even though this judge is a Trump appointee, there's no doubt in my mind that if this goes all the way to the Supreme Court, it's going to be upheld because Congress gave the power of the purse in this case to the presidency. They gave it away. And I'm not a big fan of emergency acts, nor am I a big fan of executive orders in general. But when Congress gave their power to the presidency, they gave it to the presidency. It's not dictated by who happens to occupy that office at any given moment. So Congress has really not a leg to stand on here. The ruling will not have any immediate practical consequences because other groups have already secured an order blocking Mr. Trump from proceeding. So the courts have been working against him, but it's kind of been a mixed bag. But if other courts accept Judge McFadden's reasoning, the House litigation options will narrow as it battles the president on several fronts. So they're trying to attack the president on every front possible. The Democrats always turn to the courts when they can't get something passed legislatively. That's why they're pounding on the Supreme Court doors when Kavanaugh was appointed, or confirmed actually. So, but think about this, ladies and gentlemen. Why are we even having this battle? Everyone knows, including the Democrats, they know that the border is not only a crisis, it is a disaster of epic proportions down there. And we've got some stories coming up that will demonstrate just how crazy it's gotten down there. But if you pay any halfway attention to the news, you know that it is beyond an emergency and the president is doing what he's supposed to do. He's upholding his oath. He's supposed to protect and defend the United States of America, and protecting and defending any country begins literally at establishing a border. So, I mean, why are we having it? We know why we're having this. It's purely political. Even the New York Times in recent weeks has labeled the situation at the border a crisis. So, get over it. It's a crisis. Rulings from trial judges do not set binding precedents. However, and Judge McFadden's ruling did not concern subpoenas issued by the House seeking information from the administration. Now, what information do they need? Think about that. It goes back to what I just said a few minutes ago. There is really no reasonable debate that the border is out of control, that we're being overwhelmed, we're being flooded by migrants. I mean, think about it. We just caught a couple of hundred migrants from Africa, illegal aliens, and they keep saying migrants, and I fall into that trap. They're illegal aliens. They're trying to crash into our home uninvited. So it is a crisis, as I say, of epic proportions. Yes, it is a humanitarian crisis. That's why I say build the wall, better for us all. But these yahoos in Washington, all they care about is political power. Well, you want to hear some more winning? Trump is winning, winning, winning. This next article shows you what a little bit of presidential leadership can actually do. And once again, it comes to you from the New York Times. As I say, I read publications, listen to certain shows as a public service to you, my listeners, so you don't have to. I'm just that kind of guy. Me and Billy Bob. If you hadn't met old Billy Bob Bass, he's my psychic sidekick. He keeps me straight here. He has a Twitter following. It's at Billy Bob Bass 1, and mine is at John Martin Talks if you want to check us out. But as I say, this comes from the New York Times. Mexico cracks down on migrants after pressure from Trump to act. So after pressure from Trump to act, it looks like Mexico is at least attempting to fall in line. This story is out of Tapaloocha, Mexico. Don't ask me exactly where that is. I think it's on the very southern border of Mexico. They arrived at dusk, dressed for combat, pouring from government vehicles. A phalanx of military and police personnel swarmed a small hotel in the center of Tapaloocha, this scrappy city near Mexico's border with Guatemala. Their target, undocumented migrants. Why can't they just call it what it is? I know this is New York Times, but why do we have to play all these word games? They are illegal aliens. That is their status. They're not undocumented. Their status is illegal aliens, both in Mexico and in the United States. Let's just call it what it is. All this dancing around the truth, man. And we've got another story coming up about the Democrats, how they just can't handle the truth, period. Agents rushed door to door, hauling people away while migrants shouted or ran out of the back, scampering over the rooftops of neighboring homes, witnesses said. Well, my question is, why are they running? Why are they running? They know that the reason they're running is because they know they're illegal aliens. They know their status. The New York Times might not want to admit their status. Some progressives, both in Mexico and the United States, might not want to admit their status, but they know their status. That's why they're running, because they're illegal. I mean, they know it. Why can't we admit it? It was one of several raids here last week to sweep up migrants, part of a broad Mexican crackdown against a surge of Central Americans and others streaming toward the United States. Well, let me just say, it's long overdue, Mexico. Thank you for finally doing what you're supposed to do as a sovereign nation and a supposed ally of the United States of America. In recent weeks, the Mexican authorities have been breaking up migrant caravans and setting up round-the-clock roadblocks along common routes north. Why now? Why are they doing it now? What has changed? Donald J. Trump. That is what has changed, baby. He's there, and they know that he is about promises made, promises kept, and he doesn't make threats. He tells you what he's going to do, and he does it. Kind of different than some past presidents. Just a little bit. Detentions and deportations in Mexico are multiplying quickly, sowing fear among thousands of Central Americans and others crowding the migrant shelters and budget hotels. What kind of budget do you have? Can you imagine what a budget hotel in southern Mexico along the Guatemalan border, what that must be like? I don't know. Here in southern Mexico, most of them hoping to reach the American border. This Cuban migrant at the hotel said, "It's so scary. The fear never goes away." Well, let me tell you, and I'm sympathetic to people fleeing violence and poverty and all that. And I'm not necessarily saying I wouldn't be joining them and trying to get the heck out of there. But you know what? My experience has shown me there is only one way to overcome fear. You know what that is? It's courage. Courage. That's the only way. You cannot think your way out of fear. You can only do it by taking courageous action. Because courage doesn't mean, we're coming up on the 75th anniversary of D-Day, and I remember probably about a decade ago, maybe it was on the 50th or so, because time kind of moves on when you get old salty dog like me, that there was this gentleman who, I think he was a Medal of Honor winner from D-Day, and he was on, I believe it was Larry King, that's how far back it goes, and Larry King asked him, you know, how did you weren't you afraid when, as far as storming the beach of Normandy? And he said, yes, I was afraid. Then he went on to talk about his men, and he said he didn't want men that were fearless, because if you were fearless, to be fearless in that situation, you had to be somewhat insane, and you would act irrationally. He said that he wanted people of courage, and courage, by his definition, was overcoming your fear. It wasn't the absence of fear. It was overcoming your fear and doing what you had to do. And I think that's one of the greatest definitions of courage I have ever heard to this day. And so how it applies here is, if these people, these migrants, illegal aliens, want to overcome their fear, and I don't deny that they're in fear all the time, it's not by continuing to try to crash across borders. That's not going to overcome their fear, because even if they get in the United States, they're always going to be looking over their shoulder, right? The only way they're ever going to totally overcome their fear is the courage to stand up in their own nation. That's what we had to do here in this great United States of America in order to get the freedoms that people, and the economic prosperity that people are bum rushing and bus rushing and train rushing our border for. It's because our forefathers, and people still today, have the courage to stand up and fight for freedom. The only way you ever get freedom in the history of humanity is to fight. You have to fight for it, unfortunately. It is never just bestowed upon you. Never has been, and I don't think it ever will be, but it certainly never has been. Even Mexico, yes, even Mexico had to fight for its freedom. So if you're going to crash into Mexico and ultimately try to crash the United States, keep in mind that you are crashing into countries that stood up and fought for their freedom. That's what I say about courage. Go back to your country and stand up and fight for your freedom. That's the only way you're ever going to be free of fear and feel like you're a stand-up person. That's my opinionated fact, baby. The Mexican government has been under intense pressure from President Trump to block the tens of thousands of undocumented migrants trudging north each month. With the American authorities unable to stop illegal immigration in the United States, Mr. Trump, President Trump, has taken aim at countries in the region, including Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, the origins of most of the migration, most of the illegal, threatening to punish unless they do more. They believe, baby, in DJT. They believe that he's going to do what he says, and that's the only reason that Mexico is cracking down, in my opinion, because if they generally just let people flow north, they're beginning to crack down. If true, it's because of DJT. And let me just say something. Let me just expand real quickly on what I was talking about before, about the courage. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you from my heart, I never, ever forget, like this flag behind me represents, the sacrifices that people have made and continue to make for my freedom. No, I have never actually served in the military. I will say that up front. And I think part of the reason is because I came right at the tail end of Vietnam, and it was a bit crazy, as you may remember. But I actually take a personal responsibility for the fact that I didn't serve, meaning I need to support those that do and appreciate them, those sacrifices, even more. And of course, I've had family members who served going back all the way to the Civil War and probably even beyond that. World War I, World War II, and Vietnam. Immediate family members have served in those. So I don't take it for granted at all. Last week, Mr. Trump stunned officials and business leaders on both sides of the American border by promising tariffs on all Mexican imports unless Mexico stopped undocumented migrants from crossing into the United States. Stunned? Were you stunned? Were people like Citizens for Trump members stunned? Were Deplorable Resistance members stunned? Were followers of John Martin Talks stunned? I don't think so, because we've always known that this was the man that we elected. Promises made, promises kept. Build that wall, man. Mexico will pay for the wall. Remember how they chastised President Trump for saying that? None of us out there, I've been to multiple Trump rallies, still hadn't gotten paid, by the way, Rosie O'Donnell, so I'm waiting on my check. But Trump, nobody that I know literally thought Mexico was going to come out, write a check and say, here you go, Mr. President. But there's multiple ways to make them pay for the wall. multiple ways. And so Mexico will pay for the wall. Right now, they're standing up, at least temporarily, on this. And so I appreciate it. Nobody in my audience, I don't think, was stunned. But hey, that's what the New York Times said. I'm sure they were stunned. President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, President Obrador, that's a long name, of Mexico insists that his country has been doing its part already, arguing that the crisis stems from a complex array of social and political problems across the region that would take billions in international investment, not punitive measures to fix it. So it's going to take billions. Wonder where those billions they want to come from. Good old USA, you taxpayers out there, right? I got a radical idea. I'm always coming up with these radical ideas. And this is for Mexico and the good old US of A. And the world, for that matter. Why not just enforce existing laws and see what happens? In other words, if you enforce the laws of your borders, for instance, Mexico has some of the most strict laws concerning immigration there is in the world. Just enforce them. The reason why you have such a problem is lack of enforcement. The same thing here at the United States. We have shirked our duty. Both parties have shirked their duty to have a strong border and security for decades now. We didn't get here overnight. It's taken a long time. It's going to take President Trump. He might not be able to totally resolve this in 2 terms, to be honest with you. No, I'm not saying he's going to be there longer for that. You know, I think he ought to be Secretary General at the end of all this, of the UN. But hey, we'll start by re-electing him in 2020. But just enforce existing laws. If people had been doing that for the last couple of decades, we would not be in the fix that we're in. Despite the pressure from Mr. Trump, Mexican officials have insisted they will not militarize their southern border by building a border wall or saturating it with security forces. They would do that in a heartbeat if we did what? You know what would cause them to secure their southern border? If we secured our southern border. If we put it all back on Mexico, built the wall, as I say, build the wall better for all, and we stopped the flow of immigration and they were stalled in Mexico, you better believe Mexico would stop them at the southern border in a heartbeat, man. Analysts say Mexico doesn't have the resources to harden its 700-mile-long border with its Central American neighbors, especially, check this, especially since the nation is already stretched thin dealing with record levels of violence throughout the country. Record levels of violence. I've done some shows about this in the past. If you haven't seen them, you want to see my podcast, the best way to see it is to go to John Martin Talks Facebook page directly. Like it, share it with others. You can see all the videos I've done literally over the past year. We're coming up on our anniversary this month of a full year on the air. And it's been a little bit of a struggle. Thank you guys for hanging in there with me. It's going to get better from here, I have no doubt. But I did several shows on this. Mexico and really South America in general, certainly Central America, there's a cult of death down there. There's definitely a cult of death. And it is from the cartels right down to the kidnappings, to the MS-13 gang members, the divinely inspired ones. According to Nancy Pelosi, there's a cult of death. And I'm not saying every immigrant wants to bring that with them, but they can't just check that like bags at the airport at the border. They bring this attitude, this almost expectation, if you will, certainly acceptance of a certain level of violence that we are beginning to accept here, much to our detriment, but we need to stop this cult of death from coming across here. And it is coming, just like carrying their bags, they carry that cult with them. The mass migration was underway when Mexico's president, Mr. Lopez Obrador, took office on December 1st. But as a populist and lifelong champion of the poor, what exactly is a champion of the poor? I've never, hey, we got a lot of poor people, you know, when you're rich, it's really easy to champion the poor. He campaigned on a platform of protecting migrants, human rights, vowing to reject what he called the heavy-handed enforcement first approach of his predecessors. So he started out being really liberal and saying, you know, we got no problem, just let these people in, we'll try to get them jobs, we're going to take a humanitarian. So what was the result of that, I wonder? Well, let's find out. In the first 4 months of his administration, deportations fell 38%. So he got real slack on it. What little enforcement they were doing went away, compared with the last 4 months of his predecessor term. So the predecessors were doing a little bit of something. Obrador came in and basically reversed all that. But the permissiveness, you wonder what happened. Here we go. But the permissiveness encouraged more migration from Central America. In other words, more people illegally poured into Mexico and then into our country as well, with many seeking to use Mexico as a throughway to the United States. This is very predictable. You give them minutes, they take a mile. The same thing is happening here. It's our lack of enforcement for decades that has caused the problem we have here. You cannot... the humanitarian thing to do is to enforce the existing laws and let people know that you're not going to come here. Making it easier, making it say, like, oh, we're going to look the other way, actually is more dangerous. It exacerbates the problem. That's why I say, famously so, build the wall. It's actually better for us all. And as my little cup here from my wife says, I want you on my side of the wall. The American citizens, that is. Mr. Lopez Obrador and officials in his delegation to Washington say they are optimistic about reaching a deal with the Trump administration. They got a little fire burning them. They don't want that tariff. The Mexican president suggested over the weekend that he was willing to reinforce the government's migration control strategies as long, and I love how they always throw this in there, as long as human rights were not violated. Now, before I say this, I'm not advocating for people's human rights to be violated, but they never talk about our human rights. What about the human rights in this country, and in Mexico for that matter, as a citizen of the United States of America? What rights do I have? Don't I have a right to not have overcrowded schools? Don't I have a right to, and we're going to talk about a story later in the show about LA, how it's just getting unlivable out there, but don't I have a right to safety and security in this country? You know, I interviewed several people in the past that have had experiences with, like Sabine Durden, for instance. Go back and check out my podcast, like I told you, on John Martin Talks. Like it, share it with others, my Facebook page. Sabina Durden, she lost her only child, a son, who was, by all accounts, an outstanding young American. She was a legal immigrant from Germany, by the way. She lost her son to an illegal immigrant who killed him in a DUI after that was like his third time. So doesn't Miss Durden have the right for her son to still be here? They say, oh, it could have happened. You know, you can't say all that about illegal immigration. But one thing about it, when a crime committed by an illegal immigrant can absolutely be prevented, because that person should not have been here to start with. So what about our human rights as American citizens? And I would say the same thing to citizens of Mexico. What about their human rights as citizens? Because they're being violated on a daily basis by letting these mobs, caravans, if you want to call them that, come in. All right, so we're going to move along here. This next story comes to you from The Hill. Socialism debate roils Democratic Party. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. Over the weekend, and I'll get more into the details in a second, but let me kind of set it up for you. Over the weekend, the Democratic Party of the state of California held their state convention, and over half of the 2020 Democratic field showed up, which was a lot, by the way. And Biden, and we talked about it in depth yesterday, he didn't go. He had a previously scheduled engagement at some dinner in Ohio, and the article gets back into it here in a minute, so we might talk about it later. But there were several, quote, moderate, if there is such a thing, I don't believe there is, Democrats who are running for president who made some statements about socialism, and supposedly there's this big war now going on within the Democratic Party of whether or not they are representing socialism or not. I think that's a phony debate, because they just simply are. But we'll get into details now. Socialism debate roils Democratic Party. This is from The Hill. A fierce debate over socialism has erupted among Democrats, with several centrist presidential candidates warning their progressive proposals on health care and the environment that have dominated the primary are surefire way to get President Trump reelected. So they're worried that if the Democratic Party is labeled as a socialist party, that will certainly get President Trump reelected. That's probably a legitimate fear. But I like how they say a fierce debate here, man. So I looked up the word fierce just so I could understand and make sure I understood what they were talking about. Here's the definition of fierce: having or displaying an intense or ferocious aggressiveness. Now, does that apply to the debate going on in the Democratic Party about socialism? I wish it was true. I wish there was a fierce debate going on in the Democratic Party. Lord, it would be great. It'd be like an answer to my prayers. Because I've been telling you Democrats out there to take your party back. Yeah, you can walk away. I'm not necessarily advocating that. If you want to walk away, then walk away. But if you're going to stay a Democrat and you are, quote, a moderate, a centrist, and you don't believe in socialism, then you better stand up and take your party back. Because make no mistake, the party of JFK is dead. It's plain and simple. And this is now the party of Ocasio-Cortez, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Comrade Bill de Blasio, and yes, Bernie Sanders and the rest of that ilk. It is the party of communist, socialist fanatics. That's what it is. It's just plain and simple. And so they're saying this intense debate. Let me give you just a couple of examples. What intense debate is happening with the 2020 field about the Green New Deal? They all basically signed off on it. And I heard just this morning that Biden has put out some type of statement. I haven't had a chance to review it, his campaign, where he is using the Green New Deal as a framework to combat global warming. And this guy's supposed to be the moderate. Show me where there's any moderation in I don't know about the rank and file. Certainly in the Democratic leaders, there's no debate whatsoever. And where's the fierce debate in the Democratic Party about making the baby comfortable before you kill him? I mean, their debate is about abortion after a child is born. That's the kind of, and they're not even having fierce debates. They're celebrating it in places like New York, man. I mean, get a grip. There is no fierce debate going on in the Democratic Party except who is the furthest left. That's the only fierce debate there is. I wish there was a fierce debate, but unfortunately there just isn't. 3 low polling contenders, back to the article here. Former Colorado Governor John, is it Hickenlooper? No, Hickenlooper. I'm sorry, some of these names are crazy. Do you really believe anybody named Hickenlooper is ever going to be president? I doubt it. Senator Michael Bennet, Colorado, and former John Delaney, we talked about him yesterday, how he got booed out there, are unloading on socialism, are taking shots at Medicare for all and the Green New Deal, which have gone mainstream in the Democratic Party since being embraced by Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, as well as a Representative Ocasio-Cortez. It is mainstream. I like that. At least they're admitting that. The Green New Deal in Medicare for all, in other words, free stuff, is part of the Democratic establishment now. And these guys that are like moderates or whatever, they're not, what is it, how to describe them here? Low polling contenders. Basically, they're just mosquitoes, man. And the big dogs are swatting them off like they don't exist. What did old Ocasio-Cortez said about Delaney? He should just sashay away, man. And as I said yesterday, that'd probably get him more votes if he would sashay. Hickenlooper and Delaney made waves with their warnings about socialism and Medicare for all at the California Democratic Party convention over the weekend in San Francisco, where they were booed mercilessly by the liberal crowd. Let me just tell you, I've said this before, but if I say it, it bears repeating. And I would say it to Chicken Cooper and Delaney and whoever want to consider themselves some kind of moderate or centrist. Progressives, man, you cannot reason with these progressives. You cannot deal with these progressives. You can only defeat them. That is it. I don't think you guys are going to be able to. Donald Trump can. That's why he is making socialism at the center of his campaign for re-election. Smart man, and we need to defeat it because these progressives will never give up. They will never surrender. They cannot, and I'm repeating it, but they cannot be dealt with, reasoned with, negotiated. They can only be defeated at the ballot box. That's the only chance to beat them because they're not going anywhere. Now they become targets for the party's energized, talking about these supposed centrists. Organized left wing, including Ocasio-Cortez, who encouraged Delaney to sashay away from the race after he said that Medicare for all would result in hospital bankruptcies and cost 150 Americans access to health insurance. But so he's speaking possibly some truth there. But keep this in mind. It goes back to what I was just saying. Progressives have no interest in the truth. The truth is irrelevant. I can prove it to you. In your local area, it doesn't matter if it's a city commission, school board, which I wish some of you would run for school board, by the way. That's what we need to take back, save our country. But school board, county commissions, it doesn't matter. If your commissions are like mine locally here, not in Hawthorne so much, well, even in Hawthorne too, but in Gainesville, Florida, the blue lake in the middle of Florida here. I've been living in a blue wave my whole life. You go into any organization, any commission led by progressive, led by Democrats, because there's really no difference, and it doesn't matter what they're debating. They could be debating roads, schools, whatever. And you get under citizens' comment, ask this question: how are you going to pay for it, and who's going to pay? And they will look at you like you came from Mars or something, from a different universe, because how much is it going to cost is completely irrelevant. It's because if the policy is right, the cost, it doesn't matter. Like the Green New Deal, it doesn't matter what it costs. Ocasio-Cortez will tell you that. But they'll look at you like you're crazy. And as far as who's going to pay for it, well, that's obvious. You. It's other people's money, man. But the centrists are doubling down, warning that a leftward lurch towards socialism could cost Democrats the White House in 2020. Let me tell you, man, a lurch towards socialism, that ship has sailed. Take it from an old salty dog, an old seaman myself. That's why I'm all red here. I go fishing, by the way. My fishing report should probably be out later today. But that ship has sailed, man. There is no debate, really, within the Democratic Party anymore. They are socialist communists, period, man. Liberals are supposedly irate, arguing that no one running for the Democratic nomination, here's proof of what I'm saying. Liberals are irate, arguing that no one running for the Democratic nomination, not even Sanders, a self-described Democratic socialist, is proposing that the U.S. should abandon capitalism and become a socialist country. Well, that's delusional at best, and really what it is an outright lie. They don't want you to know the truth, because if you knew the truth, the American people would not support this. And that's what they're really afraid of. And it gets more specific in just a moment. Neil Soroka, the communications director for the liberal group Democracy for America, described the centrists as check this out, as a group of older white men who think this is their best path to relevance in the primary. So old white men are irrelevant in the Democratic Party. And of course, what Oprah Winfrey said, they just need to die. There's some people just need to die, talking about old white men. I tell you what, man, it's getting tough to be an old white dude, man. I mean, we're just like persona non grata. I mean, not me per se, but there were some old white dudes that kind of formed the country, didn't they? But hey, you know, maybe that's a tired old argument nowadays. But their argument hinges, talking about the centrists in the Democratic Party, if there are any, their argument hinges on a Republican view of the world that anything that is not greed-soaked, exploitive capitalism must then be totalitarian communism, this Soroka guy said. He went on to say that's a binary choice. Republicans have decided on all of these old, irrelevant white men are doing is bending to that way of thinking because they believe it's a path to victory for their campaigns. Man. I think Donald Trump probably said this better than I could. Remember when he said ridiculous bullshit, whether or not the Democrats were going to pursue this? This whole thing is ridiculous bullshit, except for the fact that, man, there is so much anger in these people. There's so much hatred in their heart, buddy. I mean, if you're wondering, like I've told people all the time, that if they're looking for where the progressives are meeting versus where the Trump clubs are meeting, it's real easy. If you walk into a room and everybody is like pissed off, angry, and shouting, then if you're looking for the progressives, you're in the right place. If you go to a place and people are happy, got a lot of flags flying and talking, maybe singing God Bless America or whatever like that, then you're definitely not in a progressive group. You might be in a Trump club, because everybody I've seen, you go to a Trump rally, man, contrary to what they show you on TV, man, it is basically a love fest, man. People are happy, joyous, and free. You talk about Americans pursuing their God-given right to the pursuit of happiness, go to where people are wearing MAGA hats, and I can tell you, it's a happy place, man. Democrats are bracing to see how former Vice President Joe Biden reacts to the controversy, noting that the party's presidential frontrunner could ignite a vicious struggle between the progressives and the establishment wings of the party if he sides with the centrists. So Joe is going to ignite a fire. For some reason, every time I see Joe, like fire and ignite, like Trump calls him Sleepy Joe, probably I just don't see a lot of ignition in Biden myself, but maybe I'm missing something. Biden was noticeably absent from the San Francisco over the weekend, like I told you, where progressives such as Sanders and Warren took shots at him as the safe choice whose centrist leanings are ill-suited for the times. So he should, all you need to do is listen to these progressives. They will tell you. You don't have to if you'll just listen to what they tell you and take them at their word. President Trump has emboldened them to the point that they will simply tell you what they're talking about. And the best example I can think of that fits this narrative is Comrade Bill de Blasio, the mayor of the great city of New York. Not the great mayor, but he is total communist. He said on Bill Maher, I believe it was all the way back last year, before he announced recently that he was running for president, that he said when it comes to the 2020 Democratic primary, centrists / moderates need not apply. In other words, persona non grata. So these guys are getting booed. If they'd have just listened to Bill, it wouldn't have been no shock to them. Some Democrats in Washington believe that the only changes, I guess this is Swarker still, some Democrats in Washington believe the only changes we can get are tweaks and nudges. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll back up. I want to give credit where credit is due. So let's start over. This is Liawapa, as I call her, otherwise known as Pocahontas. Elizabeth Warren, the documented whitest woman that's ever lived. She said, some Democrats in Washington believe the only changes we can get are tweaks and nudges. If they dream at all, they dream small. Warren told the crowd of delegates, the time for small ideas is over. Small ideas. You mean little small ideas like freedom? These are my words, by the way. Not hers, for sure. Freedom, liberty. How about personal responsibility? There's a small idea. Private property rights. Boy, how small does it get? All of these are just small ideas according to people like Elizabeth Warren. The Constitution is a small, outdated document according to these people. Believe that. When they tell you they want to take them at their word, when they tell you they want to fundamentally change America, what that means is do away with the Constitution or ignore it, which I think is even worse, by the way. Liberals have found Hickenlooper, Chicken Cooper, whatever his name is, speech from that event, particularly talking about the California State Democratic Convention, infuriating, with many viewing his remarks on socialism as an ad hominem attack that is irrelevant to the debate going on among them. So they're saying that him talking about, hey, socialism might cost us the election, that's an ad hominem attack. So I decided I'd look it up just to make sure I was on the same page. Ad hominem definition: marked by or being an attack on an opponent's character rather than by an answer to the contentions. So by him warning them about socialism, he's attacking their character. That shows you where the modern Democratic Party is. That saying that socialism is not the way to go is an ad hominem attack on your character. And it's really rich coming from the Democrats because their entire campaign is an ad hominem attack. The entire Mueller investigation is an ad hominem attack. The entire investigation that Shifty Schiff and Jerry Nadler and Nancy Pelosi and Impeach 45, Maxine Waters, all they're doing is ad hominem attacks. They have nothing to stand on but an ad hominem attack. So I don't know where they're coming from with this. But Hickenlooper was booed for saying that if we want to beat Donald Trump, which I thought was their objective, and achieve big progressive goals, socialism is not the answer. So this dude, I mean, does he not understand that he's running as a Democratic 2020 contender? He's trying to apply logic to this. It's never been about logic for the Democrats. It's all about feelings. If they just feel good about it, then everything is all right. It's never been about logic, man. He's applying logic. You got no shot, brother. Let me just tell you. A survey from, you want to see how bad it's gotten? A survey from 2018 found that a majority of Democrats have a positive view of socialism. And don't consider that we're celebrating D-Day, the 75th anniversary. I believe it's either today or I guess maybe it's tomorrow. And that was literally where you had hundreds of thousands of people joining together, the free world, to battle socialism fanatics like the Nazis. That we fought 2 world wars against fanaticism, socialism. But these Democrats have a positive view of socialism for the first time ever. That phenomenon, according to this article, the New York Times, is largely driven by young liberals who are more likely to have a favorable view of socialism. That's one reason I say we got to elect people to school board, because the people are not being taught the true history. But here's the biggest problem we have. These young people, and man, I hate to sound like an old white dude, an old curmudgeon, but it's a bit scary, man, because it seems like more and more of our young people really want or expect something for nothing. And that has never, ever happened in human history. You're not going to get anything good for nothing. As I said earlier, you got to fight for freedom. Here's the thing. Socialism, you can vote your way into socialism, but you always got to shoot your way out. But these people want something for nothing. It's scary. My wife and I talk about it all the time. We fear for the younger generation, and I don't know if it's because we're getting older, but I can tell you, I have a lot of personal friends that are small business owners, and it doesn't matter what type of business they have. They all, for about the last 2 decades, really, but certainly in the last 4 or 5 years, even more exacerbated, they say the hardest thing they have is to hire someone who will simply show up every day on time and do what they're told to do. It's very, very difficult to find someone who will do that. Maybe you ought to hire more veterans if that's your problem, because they make a living showing up and doing what they're told to do. Thank God for them, as I said earlier. Some mainstream Democrats are frustrated by these new dynamics, believing that the progressive wing refuses to compromise and wants to drum anyone who disagrees with them out of the party. Well, let me just tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that is a fact. That's been going on for a couple of decades. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I left the Democratic Party, because they left me. It's kind of cliche to say, but I came to this conclusion really more than a decade ago, but I finally acted upon it when my wife, basically, I was kind of torn about it, and my wife told me, why don't you go and give love where you're getting love? And that's when I left the Democratic Party, because I wasn't getting any love there whatsoever, because I've always been willing to speak out, and what I had to say, as you can imagine, went over like a ton of bricks, man. But Delaney, who is running for president from Maryland, said, I'm worried that some folks in the Democratic Party are intolerant toward different views on this and don't want a debate. That won't serve us well, he said, and unfortunately, not enough Democrats want to step forward and say what they know to be true. Let me just tell you, I hate to tell you this, Mr. Delaney, but and going back to what I said a few minutes ago, I learned this over a decade ago. Progressives are the least tolerant people on the planet. If you don't lockstep drink the Kool-Aid and march goose step right with them, there is no room. If you're not for, killing the baby after you make it comfortable, you are, just persona non grata. If you want someone to be personally responsible, you're just crazy. If you want to put America first, well, you're just a racist. And if you believe in securing a border and not having just an open-ended welfare state, then you are every name called but a child of God. Let me just tell you, progressives are not tolerant. They are the most intolerant bunch out there. And they scream tolerance. That's what's really crazy. Said one prominent Democratic strategist, See how I love how they're always anonymous. If they really criticize something, they're anonymous. Because if you do like Delaney, you get booed. Said one prominent Democratic strategist, if we have a general election debate over socialism, we lose. Translation to that, he's saying if the American people, these are my words, but they're accurate. If the American people know who we truly are, we can't win. If the American people will get woke, truly woke, as they say, and see the Democrats, not for who they wish they were, not for the party of JFK, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. If they get out of the fantasy that that party still exists, then they will wake up and see that, yes, the Democrats can't win. If the American people get woke, the Democrats will be broke. That's just the way it is. And you hear this next story, our last story here, is kind of an ongoing about the inner cities, the big cities in America and the plight that they're under leadership of Democrats. And California, man, is just getting unlivable. The pictures, the videos coming out of California, the reports coming out of California are heartbreaking. I love California. I've been out there a couple of times. You remember California used to be the jewel, man. It was where everyone wanted to go. All the great things came first from California growing up, man. I mean, we just dreamed of being California, dreaming like the Beach Boys said, man. But now what used to be the jewel has become the stool. And I'm talking about human feces. This comes from the LA Times. And it's getting so bad out there that even liberal publications like the LA Times cannot turn a blind eye to this. Excuse me. Filth from homeless camps is luring rats to LA City Hall. Like it's not full of rats already. When faced with complaints earlier this year from city workers about rats infesting LA City Hall, most city officials said little about whether the problem was connected to several homeless camps right outside. You know why? Because it's like Al Gore said, it's an inconvenient truth. They don't want it. The truth, man, will not set them free. It may set you free from the Democratic Party. But a newly uncovered report from a pest control company hired by the city has raised fresh questions about whether officials wrongly downplayed that possibility during discussions at city council meetings. So I guess what they're saying is the rats, there's nothing to see here. The rats are just part of our wildlife program. It's like you don't even have to go to the zoo. The wildlife is here, man. This name of this pest control company, you got it about rat. Check this out. You got to love this. Cats USA Pest Control. Now, is there a better name for rat control than Cats USA? But anyway, Cats USA Pest Control, brought in to assess areas outside City Hall and nearby buildings, warned that homeless people create harbage for rodents. In other words, they're drawing the rats. According to the report issued December 28th and obtained last month through a public records request by a frequent critic of City Hall. So I guess common sense isn't so common. They had to do a study. They had to look, if you've seen these homeless camps around LA and you have to do a study to know that they're like disease-infested rat holes, they could have paid. I could have just looked out there and go, hey, your rats are coming from right. There goes one now. Give me a break. The company said it found poor sanitary conditions, including leftover food, human waste, and hypodermic needles, and recommended that the city clear away, check this out, the homeless population living in the Civic Center, wrote David Costa, building construction and maintenance superintendent. So homeless people are literally living in the Civic Center. What, have they had like Katrina out there? The last time we saw something like this was after Katrina. And you could expect that. What is happening? What is the disaster that's happening in LA that has homeless people living at the Civic Center? That disaster is they're run by Democrats. That's what the disaster is. The homeless are using the graded areas above the pits as their bathroom and relieving themselves. This is also attracting the rats. Custodial will need, this is from the report, Custodial will need to do some hazmat cleaning of the grates and the pits. So they got to do hazmat cleanings. There are even hypodermic needles being tossed in the pits along with human waste and other garbage. Brought to you compliments of the Democratic Party. Could it be coming to a neighborhood near you? If you keep electing Democrats, it's a guarantee. The Department of General Services said in an email to the Times that it responded to Cat USA report by ordering regular cleanups of the sidewalks around City Hall and nearby municipal buildings. So you need a report to clean up around City Hall and the Civic Center. Man, progressives just fear the truth. They can't handle the truth. They don't want to talk about the truth. They tried to bury this report, but the people at City Hall are getting sick from typhus. And police officers are getting sick from typhus in LA. The bubonic plague is coming back to the streets of LA, man. The dark age Democrats, as I call them, are bringing this to you, man. But I mean, how much do you have to have it be just rats like Coach crawl over you? You know, like a parrot on your shoulder. You go, oh, there's my pet rat, Bean. Michael Jackson's song about Ben, which is about a rat, by the way. They fear the truth. But Eleanor Stern, spokesman for the city's Bureau of Sanitation, said cleanups of homeless camps currently take place every weekend. It's like, hey, we just go clean up the homeless camp at the Civic Center and include the disposal of hazardous materials, the removal and storage of items owned by homeless people, and the power washing of sidewalks. I heard on Rush Limbaugh, the Godfather, I will give him credit, that LA had a program. They paid homeless people like $600,000 just to throw their crap away. You know, so what did that probably do? Encourage them to bring more crap. Sanctuary city, that's probably not part of the problem, right? Because here's the Democratic solution to this. They got too many poor people that are homeless and they're living on the streets of LA. Now, I'm sympathetic to this, okay? I am. But the solution, only the Democrats' solution, only Democrats can come up with a solution that the way to solve the poor, basically unemployed homeless situation is to bring more poor people in Sanctuary City. It's just crazy. I mean, Tucker Carlson was like ridiculed for saying that Sanctuary City and illegal immigration makes your city poorer and dirtier. And he was called everything but a child of God for that. He's just speaking the truth. LA, San Francisco are living testaments to this. But the truth, they can't handle the truth. Because if true, they lose. If the truth comes out, the progressives lose. General Services also does daily cleanup. City agencies can't permanently, check this out, remove homeless from people from the areas around City Hall because they have a legal right to be on the sidewalks during certain times. Always about their legal. How about the legal rights of citizens, tax-paying citizens, to walk the city sidewalks without a poop mat? I mean, is it too much to ask that if I visit your city, I don't have to have a poop mat and step over needles just to get to City Hall? Is that too much to ask as an American citizen? I mean, these liberal progressives are, it is madness, man. We've got some choices to make, ladies and gentlemen. Either we're going to survive or we're going to go the way of the dinosaur. Because if we let bubonic plague and dark age Democrats bring this back to us, I guess we deserve what we get. Council President Herb Wesson cautioned that public against blaming homeless individuals for the problem. Now, this is the council president. This is who you elected in LA, by the way. Wake up. Get woke. He said, I really want us to get to the facts. The fact that rats are running across your desk is not fact enough, Weston said. I do not want to have people who are unfortunately living on the streets blamed for something they might not have anything to do with, but they're just an easy target. Wow. I mean, and this is not a knock necessarily on homeless. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that if you got human feces, garbage, leftover food, needles piling up, mountainous-sized piles of this stuff, by the way. We're not talking about a little bit here. We're talking about boxcar loads of this crap. That is not going to bring rats. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. But this is my words on this. This is the problem with progressives in general. It goes back to that Democratic meeting in California, of all places. When your eyes see the truth, when you can see the truth with your eyes, but it's against your politics to speak the truth, to actually say the emperor, that guy's naked, he has no clothes on, then when your politics and the reality don't mesh, then go with the fantasy every single time, because the left exists on fantasy. They have to. They have to exist on the fantasy that an open border and a welfare state won't be the end of America. They have to live on the fantasy that the Mueller report, that President Trump, lived his whole life, even if you love him or hate him, you got to admit this is ludicrous, that he lived his whole life, worked his way up to be an international, if you want to call him playboy, call him that. Oh, by the way, Melania, man, wow, is she representing us across the pond there? That's a side story, but my God, man, that lady is class personified. But you believe that President Trump spent his whole life getting to where he is, President of the United States, just so he could be in the pocket of the Russians? Then you are truly living a fantasy. Everything about the progressives is built on a lie. And the fact that you are willing to believe that shows that you are willing to become a mushroom. Because what I say, I haven't said this in a while, but what the left and really the rhinos, all the establishment political apparatus that is running this country want you, the American citizens, to be is mushrooms. They want you to be in the dark, feed you tons of bullshit, and you just write a check. That's what they want to do. So if you really want to get woke, which I appreciate my audience as being a bunch of truly woke people, then you need to stand up, face the truth, and vote correctly, because progressives can only be defeated. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Go directly to John Martin Talks Facebook page, like it, and share it with others. Thank you so much for your support. But above all else, as I say every day, from my family, from my heart to yours, have a blessed day.